Let's go ahead and create a view for our new database. And the first thing I'm going to do before that is I'm going to get rid of all of these delete statements. Actually, I'm going to cut them. Let me cut out everything from here on down. And I'm going to put those in a new query file. And so that's going to be use CIS 275 sandbox X. And then I'll go ahead and save that as deletes.sql. Do week 8 deletes. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and execute this whole thing to recreate the databases. And now I'm going to create a view. So we've been using views all through the course, the all data views. But for something like this, what you want to do is you sort of want to customize your view for what the database is actually being used for. And so let's go ahead and look at an example of similar functionality. So here's a discus discussion that we started out with. And we see that for a particular discussion, we're going to need the each individual post. And for each individual post, we're going to need the title of the post, the content of the post, the user who posted it along with their username, total number of upvotes, total number of downvotes, and how long it's been since the post was made. In addition, we're going to need some things that are a little hidden from just looking at the interface, like when user clicks on reply, we're going to need to know the ID of the post that they're replying to. And we're going to need to know the user ID as well. But that's probably enough to get started with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a select statement that returns all of that information for a discussion, and then I'm going to create a view around that select statement. So back here, we already had one that was similar, but I'm going to select star, just to start with, from, and I want one row for each post. So I'll start with mg post. And then I need to know information about the author of the post. So I'm going to go ahead and join with mg user, and that's going to get me the username. So let me go ahead and match the post user ID to mg user dot user ID, and I misspelled post here. Okay, so that gets me the username and the ID for the user. Then the title and content, those are going to be from mg post. I also need the date difference between when the post was made, which is on the post, and the current time. And then I need to calculate the number of upvotes and downvotes. So let's go ahead and write a separate query to do that part. Let me go ahead and execute that. So here's what I have from the first select statement. And then in order to get the total number of upvotes, let me go ahead and write a subquery for that. So this one is going to find the count star, select count star from mg rating where mg rating dot fk post ID is equal to the post ID in the outer query, which is mg post dot post ID, and also where mg rating dot upvote is equal to 1. So those are the total upvotes. And then the same basic query here, except where upvote is -1 as downvotes. So let me try this query. And what am I? So multi-part identifier mg.postid could not be found. Let me go ahead and execute the query and see what happens. Oh, I executed the whole thing, but that's okay. So let me just select that query and execute it. Incorrect syntax near where. Oh, I have where twice. That should be and. And same thing here. Okay, so that looks good. Let me execute the query. Okay, good. So I have all my post information, and then at the end I have total number of upvotes and total number of downvotes, and that looks like what I had before I did the deletes. So now the next step is I'm going to pick out only certain columns that I need. So I will need the post ID. So we'll include post ID. And I could be specific here. I don't need to because there's only one post ID column, but I'm going to go ahead and prefix it anyhow just to make life easier later on. And then I probably need the discussion ID as well. Safe to include it. It doesn't actually show up here, but I might want to include the discussion ID in the title. So mg discussion dot discussion ID mg discussion dot name, and then the title of the post, and the content of the post. And then for the posted date, I'm going to do date diff of, I forget which order this is in, but I think posted date first, and that's an mg post. Date diff of that with get date. So that's either how long ago or I have that backwards. We'll find out in a second. And let me fix this as long as I'm here. Am I joining? So I need to join with discussion as well to get that stuff. Okay, so now I have the discussion stuff. Oh, and I think there's this is the third argument is a unit, but I believe it uses a piece of text. So let me look that up. I think it's like single quote s or maybe seconds. Let me take a look. Oh, okay, so date part is first, and then start date and end date. And I want seconds because I can do the math on the application side. So Let's try S and see if that works. And that's just a code, so I think it's just like so. Yeah, okay. So let's see what I have so far. Okay, so I have my post ID, discussion ID, name of the discussion, title of the post, content. That's the how long ago as, let's see, let's call that the age of the post in seconds. And then we have upvotes and downvotes. And so the only other thing I need is the user ID and username. So let's go ahead and add that. mg user dot user ID mg user dot username. So that should be everything I need. Okay, so that looks good. Now I'm going to go ahead and you'll notice the age went up because it's been a little while since I executed the query. So if I run it again, now it's 319 seconds. So let's go ahead and turn this into a view. And the syntax is pretty straightforward. It's just create view, and then I give a name for the view. So let's call that discussion posts as, and then the select statement comes after that. And I need to actually close off the batch first. And then I will probably need to close off the batch after as well. Okay, so let's execute that whole thing. And I didn't get any errors. So now let's select star from discussion posts where discussion ID is equal to 1. So that will give me for what I would need to generate a web page that had the current discussion topic on it. And that gives me everything I need. So if I want to delete the view, that's going to be almost the same as deleting a table. Drop view discussion posts. And works fine. So if I try to execute this again, I have an error. Now, I want to keep this view around, so I'm going to get rid of that line and execute. So back to where I was before. And the last thing I want to do is show you about indexes. So basically, an index is going to allow you to do a select statement more quickly if you're matching values in the index against other values in other columns or against constants in a where statement in a query and things like that. So for example, if I want to find all of the posts where the username was Alice, I could do something like select star from discussion posts where first name is Alice. And actually, I'm not including first name in my views, so I'm going to join with mg profile on user ID equals mg profile dot user ID. Let's make that discussion posts .mg profile, like so. I don't know why I did that. That should be over here. Okay, there we go. So if I execute this query, it works perfectly fine. Actually, there are no posts by Alice, apparently. Let me take a look again. Oh, and I do have username here. No, okay, so that was the problem. What is Alice's first name? Let's select star from that with the join and not include the where clause. And let's see what we get for first name, last name. Yeah, so I left those null for Alice. So let's use Charlie instead. Okay, so here are all the posts by users with the first name Charlie. And the query works perfectly fine, and there's not a lot of data, so it's relatively quick. But as I add more and more and more data, it becomes more and more expensive to search on first name. And if that was something that I wanted to do a lot, find all of the posts with the first name Charlie, then it would benefit me to create an index, which is basically a simple lookup table where it can quickly get to the rows that it needs. And some kinds of queries can be answered just by looking at the index. So there are some, so it makes retrieval faster potentially if I'm trying to find information off of the first name. But there's a downside as well, because first the index uses additional storage on the database, on the disk. And then second, it has to be updated. The index has to be updated every time I insert or update information in the table where first name occurs, and when I delete rows from the table as well. So upside is it makes search select faster. Downside is that it makes update, insert, and delete slower. So knowing how your application is actually accessing the database is going to have a big impact on whether you choose to create an index or not and which fields you choose to index. Now, the exception to this is primary keys for a database, because by default, the normal order that the database server is going to store information on disk is for a table is going to be in order by the primary key. So basically, you essentially are paying for the primary key up front as an index, and you can use it as an index, and it's going to be efficient to retrieve information from the database in primary key order. But for anything other than the primary key, it's really a cost-benefit decision as to whether to create an index for that field. Now here for this particular application, I don't think it's going to be very common to look for all of the posts with first name Charlie. But it may be pretty common to want to order by upvotes or downvotes, or by username. So for example, looking up other posts by username, that could be something that I would want to do fairly frequently. So let's go ahead and create an index for username. And the syntax for that is just create index, and then you give it a name. And I use something like ix underscore and then the name of the table that the column belongs to. And so username belongs to the user table. And then the name of the column. And that's usually enough to identify what this index is referring to from the name. And then you say with discussion posts, with ng user username. And actually that's on. There we go. Okay. So all I need to do to create the index is execute that statement. And it takes a while. When you build the index in the first place, depending on how much data you have in there, it has to go through all of the data and build that index and then store it out on disk. So um, in the long run, it's cheaper to add all of your rows first. If you're building a big database, do all of the inserts first and then build the index after all the data's been loaded. Like with the IMDb database, if you're building that, basically you want to build the tables first and then you want to create the indexes after, because that's cheaper than having to update the index every time you add a new row to any of the tables. Here it doesn't matter because we're not talking about a lot of data. But anyway, so there's an index for the username. If we also wanted to look up things by, for example, when they were posted, create index ix under post under, what was the name of that column? Actually, let me pull that up again. Yeah, the posted date. So if I wanted to retrieve things by posted date or order by posted date, on mg post posted date, and then execute that, and it works fine. So not going to have a profound impact on the functionality, but can have a profound impact on retrieval times, depending on what your business logic is like when you're actually making these calls. And then if you wanted to delete an index, you can drop index ix username, like so. Must specify the table name and index name for the drop index statement. So I think I actually have to say on mg username. Let's try actually that. Okay, yeah, so I specify the column and the table. Cannot drop the index because it does not exist or you do not have permission. Actually, let's execute that again. So it does exist. Oh, okay. That's what I wanted. There, okay. So yeah, you just put the table name where the index is created. So to drop the other one, like so.